There was a lot of surprises in this election, and one of them was actually the Gen Z vote. Could Gen Zers have cost Kamala Harris the election? 4 years ago, Joe Biden won the youth vote by 24 points, but Harris only carried a fraction of that. Look at this, beating Trump by only 6 points. So why did Gen Zers flock to Trump when most data and polling signaled the opposite? Nancy Pelosi suggested in today's New York Times the Democrats needed a real primary. This was interesting. She said, quote, had the president gotten out sooner, there may have been other candidates in the race. Now, would that have actually made the difference for Gen Zers? Is this all connected? I want to bring in President of the College Republicans of America, Will Donahue, and also social media influencer and immigration activist, Carlos Eduardo Espina, two young guys here who can explain this for us. Will, I want to start with you. What do you think ended up attracting so many Gen Zers to Trump?
Thanks for having me on, Brian. I think the primary reason is the economy. You know, we had exit polls that asked young voters, what was the reason you voted the way you did? And it turns out the majority of them wanted the economy. It was 42%. As plurality, they wanted the economy. 9% of men wanted abortion. So I think primarily this was an economy-driven election. But I think the other thing is, and this is not talked about very often, non-traditional media. Barron Trump encouraged his father to go on podcasts like Joe Rogan and Theo Vaughn and Aiden Ross and Logan Paul. These are mediums that reach out to a type of voter that are typically apolitical, right? They're typically probably conservative, maybe liberal leaning, but they ended up voting for Trump because they identified with him. You know, Gen Z thought President Trump was the better pick. Kamala lost the cultural battle and got the impression that she was just fake and unlikable.
Do you think, Carlos, that in a sense, Democrats took Gen Z for granted? Because I think most people just assume, oh, the young people are going to go for the Democrats. Oh, the kids on the college campuses are all Democrat. But that wasn't exactly the case this time. I mean, did they take them for granted, Carlos?
I'm not sure if they took them for granted. I think they just fundamentally misunderstand Gen Z, particularly Gen Z men, because if we look at the breakdown, there was a big divide between Gen Z men and Gen Z women. And I think what, you know, the Kamala campaign got wrong was not putting her on these podcasts that were just mentioned or more of these spaces and letting her just be herself. You know, I'm someone who actually got to meet with her, talk with her in person, and she is pretty likable, but I think she was very protected, very insulated. You know, they took a while to get her in front of the press, in front of these non-traditional media. And I also understand, right? It was a very short-term campaign. It was very last minute. No one expected it. So maybe had we had more time, it would have better planned out. But I think, you know, there was that Trump was really good at managing social media, getting on these podcasts, getting on these streams, getting on these places that people thought were a joke, right? But people are listening to these, and there's millions of people who care, you know, what Aiden Ross has to say and what Joe Rogan and others are saying. So I think it was really a big mistake not getting her on those places.
Yeah, and I remember, I think the statement that Harris campaign put out at the time about why she didn't go on Rogan was like scheduling conflicts at that moment. But it's like, come on, it's Rogan. I mean, the audience is massive. What could be more important than that? I'm curious, Carlos, what you think about these celebrity endorsements, because they made such a big deal when Taylor Swift endorsed Harris, and then Beyonce was at the rally, LeBron James. I mean, these were like massive headlines. J-Lo, Oprah. I mean, does any of that matter? Does this show us, Carlos, that those endorsements aren't that big of a deal anymore?
I think, you know, they are a bit overstated, but also with the names you mentioned, look at the gender. I'm saying, I think, you know, maybe for the women in Gen Z, they are a big deal, but there really wasn't, I feel like, a big enough push for Gen Z men. And there is that big divide, and we have to understand that whether we think it's right or not, it exists. And I think, you know, when you focus so much on celebrity endorsements, it almost gives the perception, right, that you're the party of the elite, that you're the party of the rich, that you're the party of Hollywood, which can actually have a negative effect. And that's the way I kind of saw it to an extent. I was kind of like, hey, why are all these, you know, I guess it's cool, right? But to a point, you want endorsements from working class people, from everyday people. And I feel like the average Gen Zer just doesn't really identify with a lot of these celebrity endorsements. And I mean, that was just my perspective on it. I think it would have been better to get a little bit more diversity there.
Will, do you think that, it's funny, we were talking about this before the show. I mean, are frat boys the new soccer moms? Because you used to always hear about the candidates going after the soccer moms and the suburban women. But now it seems like it's all about these young kids and the frat guys.
I do think they're a new voting bloc. And I can't say I disagree with anything my colleague on the other side of the aisle just said. I agree with all of it. There was a 29-point swing in the 18 to 29 male voting demographic towards President Trump. And, the honest truth is Kamala Harris went on Call Her Daddy and Stephen Colbert. She made zero attempt to reach out to 18 to 29 males. And so I think they are a rising demographic. They're a demographic that had a massive near 30-point shift. And they're going to be something that, both parties are going to be paying attention to in the future. I think Trump was genius for jumping on TikTok and trying to reach that audience. And it paid off big time for him on Tuesday.
Hey, thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your screen. And don't forget, click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.